Beate Chelette. Wow, what an inspiring person. She's a growth architect. So she works with people with businesses on growth. But her backstory is incredible. Wait till you hear it. She talks about surrender. At this point where even when I lost all the weight, and the doctor said, if I don't lose the weight, not going to see my daughter graduate. Perhaps that was a moment of surrender as well. And she's had my goodness, former employee stole clients, lawsuits, death, and divorce, and just all these things kind of pile on her. And the way she turned it all around, and she was able to capitalize and eventually sell her major product to Bill Gates. And it's just an incredible story, and how she helps people is absolutely wonderful. And I open up the conversation with, I deal with a lot of tech companies, small companies that say they want to grow, but they're not willing to work at it. They're not really doing it. They don't really want to put in the time. And I open with that. What do you do with that? And she talks a lot about change and not wanting change and whether growth is there. Wonderful conversation. Her view on discipline. The first thing she said, by the way, is decision. Decision has to be made. But just a wonderful conversation with Beate. I really, really enjoyed it. I know you will as well. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. It's going to be very exciting. Beate Chelette, thank you so much for your time. I'm really, really excited to talk to you. How do you work with a group that says they want to grow, but when you get to know them, they really don't, or they don't want to put in the effort?
I ask them if the pain of staying where they are is greater than their fear of change.
You
Because,
think it's just a fear of change. It's interesting.
yes, because your pain of repeating what you're already doing has to be significantly greater than your fear of making a change. And so it's like, if I don't change, something terrible has to happen. Or it's like, well, then I'm going to remain the same forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So the pain of the consequence of not making the change has to be clear, so that the person in front of me then makes a decision, because my job is just to get him to make a decision. And then once they make a decision to change, then they're deciding whether or not they want to work with me or not. But I'm not here to convince anybody, and I should not want this more for you than you want this for yourself.
Yeah. So as a growth architect, you assume that they're coming to you to grow. It seems so simple.
Yes. And
I'm in the
then,
tech industry. I work with a lot of small businesses that say they want to grow, but they just don't. It's a lifestyle business. They're not willing to not do the sales, have somebody else to do it, whatever it may be, and they're in their own way.
well, that's because they like the idea of the outcome. And the idea of the outcome is something that in internet marketing is the big promise, because it's based upon the language that internet marketers have figured out that you speak in. So somebody doesn't say, I want to learn how to make my business more effective so that I can free up my time, serve my clients better. Somebody will search for, how do I find more clients? So their understanding of what the issue is not what the problem is. Or they go and they say, I need to find better people to hire. Never mind that they're really horrible leaders. And the real problem is that they don't know how to lead. They don't think about it like that because, of course, it's never them. It's always everybody else. And so from that perspective, what happens is that if there is a mismatch, Joey, in the language of the pain point as the client or the prospect understands it, and the actual problem that I know that they're having, they're not going to change. They're not going to be attracted to this, and I can't sell anything because, and then I can't help them because if I say, well, I know you want to find better people, but really the real problem is that you're a really miserable, shitty leader, and we need to work on your leadership skills. You think they're going to hire me? They're going to say, you completely missed the mark here, and you call yourself the growth architect? My problem is definitely not me. I'm an amazing leader. My wife loves me. My kids think I'm amazing. My mom tells me I'm an awesome standout guy. It's those guys.
It's fascinating, Beate. I've had managers that thought they were leaders. It's a big difference between leading and managing.
Oh, 100%. 100% is, the second part that goes into it, Joey, and I'm going to just completely take a dive here off the deep end.
Please.
Is that people have a story in their head that they believe their entire lives to be. And so they're here to hold on to that story at all cost while they want to make a change. Now, if you want to make a change, the story has to change a little bit somewhere in there. So if you've been a victim your entire life and now you want to be a leader, you're going to have to let go of the victim story because you can't lead from a victim perspective or the wounded healer. You have to lead from a perspective of actual leadership. So unless you understand what that means, how is that going to work? So we always have to make decisions at every point in our life to say, well, what's the consequence of me staying where I am? Do I like this story? Do I believe the story is true? Hypothetically saying, if this story had another side to the story, like if I were to put an opposing person on the other side of the story and had them tell the story, how would they tell that story? And I have an example, a very personal example that just happened to me, and it has nothing to do with business, but I think everybody completely understands it because it's so outrageous. My mother calls me out of the blue, and I've been doing a lot of deep, deep, deep spiritual work, especially around the story. And she tells me that when I was an infant, that the doctor didn't like fat babies. And so she just didn't feed me enough, and that I would whimper at night. And eventually she figured out that she should feed me more, and then she did, and then I was happier. And I'm thinking to myself, Joey, what idiot would call their own child and tell them that? Because that is participating in the story of my childhood trauma of having a very difficult parent to deal with. And then I'm thinking, well, it kind of can't really be that somebody would be this out of their mind to call me to retroactively say, oh, by the way, the abuse story started way earlier than you remember it. It started when you were an infant. I'm like, so is there another side to the story? And then it dawned on me. And I said, the other side of the story is probably along these lines. Here's a woman who grew up in World War II, whose father was a Nazi, whose mother was a Nazi, who was told that authority is authority, and you better listen or you die. So here's a doctor, the God in white, telling her something. And her story to me is, but guess what? I fought for you. I fought hard against the authority. And then I made a risky decision. I I disobeyed an authority. And that's why she's telling me the story. Now that
Hmm.
makes a lot more sense on why she would call me to tell me that.
Ah,
So, but that story does not fit my childhood trauma
right.
victim, what happened to me story. That story is a different story. So, which of the stories is true?
Hmm. Those generational stories. My father, Italian immigrant, the Nazis came into
Yeah.
Italy and my uncle took him up and, he got his first pair of shoes when he was 12 years old. And, he raised me like his parents raised him. It was just very different. It's not that, and so I say, oh, how come this? How come that? Well, once you hear the story and you understand it, yeah, which is truth? There can be two truths.
It's the same story, though.
Yeah.
And so, when we look and back to your original question, Joey, about what's changed,
Hmm.
what if the story that you're holding on to is not true?
Hmm.
What would change? And then in the end, does it actually matter which of the two stories is true? Does it matter? Does it change anything?
Fascinating history, Beate. You own a business. You felt some things going on in your life. You felt something was wrong with somebody, and man, there was really something going on. You fired them, and the next thing you know, deception and treachery and disloyalty and lawsuits, and you spend a year of your life just to prove that you're right, and you regret it, and it's yeah. Yeah, you won the battle but lost the war, I guess.
Yes, but you picked up on that pretty quickly. Yes, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, when the lawsuit was over, and I remember this vividly, and I pay my attorney, who got, of
Mm.
course, the bulk of the money, and I pay my debt. And then I went to the flower mart here in Los Angeles to get some flowers and drove him down to Long Beach where my attorney was. And then I had like $1,000 left in the bank account.
Unbelievable.
And I had to start all over again. So that's where I started. And after a full year of a fight, that's where I ended up again.
So the moral of that story again,
Please don't get involved in lawsuits.
yeah, the lawsuits, yeah, only the lawyers win. Yeah,
Literally
that's
only the
it.
lawyers. You think this
Yeah,
is about being right.
right.
Yeah, the moral of the story is the law is not about being right. The law is
Mm.
about who has the biggest pockets and can put up the longest fight. And it's all designed of somebody's going to give up at some point.
But then you've got, the bad news, very tough marriage, you go to visit your father who had a illness, turns out it's something else, he dies, you lose your house, I mean, you're pointing your fists at the Lord above, and you're having a come to Jesus moment.
Yes, and that's called surrender.
Mm.
So, looking at this from the perspective, Joey, of what I now know today,
Mm.
looking
Mm.
backward, I can tell you that all the spiritual principles of success, uh, on whether it's Napoleon Hill or Wallace Waddle or whoever you read, these were the spiritual principles. They are you decide the vision of what you want, and then you hold on to it, and you go for it. And then you have to be ready to receive. But do not get involved in sourcing.
Mm.
Sourcing is up to the one source. God, spirit, the universe, the laws that exist, the laws of attraction, the law of polarity. But we forget because we want to be involved in every part of our lives. We think that we are going to determine every step of the way. So if you have ever dated and you say, well, the woman I'm looking for is somebody who's very kind and somebody who is beautiful inside out, somebody who is going to be a great parent, a great mother, somebody who comes from a good family, somebody who has values. You you then put things into motion. You may go on the dating websites, you may go out more, you ask your friends, see if they can make you introductions. But you're not every step of the way sitting in the bus. Every woman you meet and you say, "Are you the one? Are you the one?
Mm,
Are you the
mm,
one?" You put it out and you believe that the right woman will find you. And magically, she does. How did that happen? But when we
mm,
go into business, we believe that we can manipulate every step of the way. That if we work harder, if we run more ads, if we learn how to manipulate the system better, which internet marketing has really put out there for us, that then we somehow be more successful and happier and more fulfilled. But looking at what's happening in the market, I think the opposite is true. The richer
mm.
get richer because they figured out the hacks and they run it. And then everybody else is trying to achieve that, which is a 1% achievable rate. I mean, there's what, like 10 big internet marketers that are holding 90% of the market. So the decision really always is about what is it that you want?
Hmm.
And what does your business model look like? Do you actually want an internet marketing business model, or do you want a serving business model? Do you want fewer clients but better clients? Do you want higher ticket clients? What is it? And then you build the business model based on that. So going back to the story is you have to come to the point where you surrender to the knowledge that the world, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is a good place and that you're here to be taken care of. But the more you doubt that it's there for you, the less it will be available to. But the more you know it is, the more it can come into your world. And now if you surrender and say, I've done everything. I've done everything I could. I've taken all the steps. I've fought all the battles. Now I need to surrender and leave it up to someone else to take over. And if it's really not meant to be after all of that, I'm going to be okay with that because I really literally did everything. And
Mm.
that's when my luck turned. And then 18 months after the worst moment of my life, when my dad died, I sold my business for millions of dollars to Bill Gates. Well, how did that happen? I was out cold. I surrendered. I didn't give up. I surrendered.
Talk to me more about surrendering.
Surrender is the art of believing that what you want and truly desire is yours to have,
Hmm.
and not getting involved with I wonder where I'm going to meet her. I wonder what she's going to wear. What should I wear when I meet her? But you said I know the woman's out there. I got clear. This is my time. I visualized her. I'm surrendering it now. I'm going to let it happen the way it happens. And inevitably one day you call your parents and say, I met someone. And it's when you least expect it because you're not out there sourcing yourself.
Hmm.
So the art of surrender is the the thought process goes like this. You have a thought that makes you very happy. It could be a song, and when you listen to that song, you get that fuzzy feeling inside. You know, I think about when my grandchild was born, Kayliana, when I saw her head come through the birth canal and I
Wow.
saw the crown of her head for the first time. I mean, it just fills me with so much gratitude and joy.
Mm.
Now I take this thought and I expand this thought because I already know what this feels like. I'm like, I'm so grateful for having been there for my grandchild to be born. I'm so grateful to have a good relationship with my daughter. I'm so grateful for the friends and family in my life. I'm so grateful that I'm in service of so many people. I'm so grateful that I get to do something I really truly love. So I take this thought and I expand that one happy thought into a larger blanket that goes over what I want to achieve. And then I imagine, I visualize this feeling of what this feels like, and then I surrender to it. I'm like,
Hmm.
that's it. All I have to do is hold on to this wish, desire, vision that I have with that amount of emotion and feeling. And then I surrender that and let that happen.
How much of what, when you're surrendering like this, Beate, how much of what happens to you is manifested, is created. Your nagging ex mother-in-law insisted that you write the president a letter, and you just to kind of silence her, you did so, but it turned out you got an introduction to an SBA officer that helped you. So how much of it is manifested? How much is going to happen? I always worry about. I don't say worry. I always wonder about this.
It's interesting that you say it like that, because that incident, it was so hilarious, really, because
Yeah.
you go, I need help, I need help, I need help with this. I don't have any money. I need to get access to money. And then my former mother-in-law just goes like, you need to write a letter to the president. It's your president after all. Why are you wasting time with people that are not the number one people in the country? Why don't you go to the one number? I mean, and she just would not stop, Joey.
Ah.
Would not stop. And eventually I'm like, fine. Fine. I'm going to write the damn letter. So just so I don't have to have this conversation anymore. But then, to your point, when the SBA then contacts me, because they also got a letter from the White House, and it says some nutcase in Los Angeles, instead of calling you, send us a letter. Please take care of her. And he goes like, I got to call her. I mean, I got to see what kind of crazy woman that is. And his first thing's like, why don't you call me? I'm like, never even occurred to me that I could call you. So when I stopped judging on how to achieve the outcome, but followed the path and leaned into what is in front of me, even though I thought it was ridiculous. Who the heck writes a letter to the President of the United States? I did. And I will tell you my story. There's been thousands of people that heard my story that have since written letters to the United States president. But that set a series of events in motion, the SBA and the second in command, and things that eventually then got me the restructure of the debt, freed up my line of credit, made the cash available to hold me over for 3 months until I was break even, making me the world leader in my category 18 months later, attracting the attention of Bill Gates' company that wanted what I had, and making me a multi-million-dollar offer. Like, you can't make up this stuff. So what we do in the surrender part, we say, I surrender, but I will not write the letter to the president. Because that makes no sense. So you judge. That's not surrendering. I mean, my surrendering was more like throwing a white flag on the field, because she was so annoying. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I didn't know it at the time. So we're in this perpetual state of judging instead of leaning into the discomfort and saying, what do I have to lose writing a letter to the President of the United States? I'll make her happy. If something happens, great. If not, it's not. But I fought it for months and months and months and months and months.
Why be a growth architect? I mean, you went through this, you did very well. Why do it? Why help others like this?
There was a moment in a mastermind that I joined afterward, and I had just made a presentation, and somebody said to me, his name was Christian Bart, and he said to me, have you ever thought about that God made you do this so you could do the other thing that you're really here to do? And it just didn't leave me, that thought. And so I love sharing the information. I love sharing the shortcuts. I love seeing people succeed. I love people taking what I've learned, the hardship that I've had, the misery I went through, and getting there faster. And if that's my contribution, it keeps me engaged. It keeps me happy. It keeps me in purpose. It keeps me fulfilled, really. And so I'm going to do it as long as I can, because I like making this side look good, because if I cannot make coming out on the other side look good, we're all screwed.
And when you work with people, with companies that want to grow, is surrender always necessary?
You have to be clear about what the spiritual capacity is of the person you're working with. Not everybody has the ability to understand these kinds of principles, so we have to meet people where they are at. It's not exactly like I go in blazing and I said, hey, let's set intentions and let's surrender to the outcome. But we have to go in and we have to follow a process because I'm the growth architect. So they do expect a process. So I have to give them a process, and I give them a process. But as we go into this process or into building strategies and systems and design what you want in a business model, these questions do come up. Well, what is in your way? If we think about mindset, skill set, and action set, which are all three required, how do you measure in these three areas? Do you act like somebody who has a $5 million business? I just had this conversation the other day. It was a woman that was like, well, a virtual assistant shouldn't be any more than $5, and I only want to hire people in third world countries because they're cheaper, and I just don't get the quality of the people, and I keep hiring and firing. And at the same time, this is a person who has multi-million dollars in contracts that are going to come through in the next 3 years, and she's arguing over not getting enough value out of a $5 administrative assistant. And I looked at her and I said, just cut the BS already, will you?
Mm-hmm.
Is that somebody who has $12 million in contract signed? Is that person going to argue over spending hours and hours and hours on finding a $5 assistant?
Mm.
Does that person act like that? She says, well, that sounds ridiculous. I said, well, that's my point. You sound ridiculous. Somebody who has millions of dollars in the books over the next 3 years needs to act like somebody who has millions of dollars on the books over the next 3 years, like a real business owner, not like some broke person that wants to get through the first $50,000.
I opened the conversation, Beate, with what when somebody doesn't want to work, somebody doesn't want to grow, and you're describing like the roadblocks that these people put up all the time. I- Who won't you work with?
If somebody doesn't have an idea at all, so
Ah,
so if somebody says, well, I could be a social media expert, I could be a consultant, I could be a life coach, I could be a business coach, I could be an HR. So somebody who is at a point where they are all over the place, or somebody who can't commit. I have a prospect that, that would be a good size contract. And I know she's avoiding making the decision. And eventually I just said to her, you are going to continue to burn the candle on both ends
mm,
until you can no more. If you do not step in action now, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen, and I can help you. But unless you commit to making the change, you are adding another thing to do, and then it will not work. It has to be
hmm,
a commitment to change. Because if people go and hire you, this is, I think, the criteria, this is the essence of the question you asked: who will I not work with?
yeah.
I will not work with people that are looking at this as another thing to do versus the vehicle to change.
Huh. Please repeat that. Not something just to do.
Yes, it is something. If people believe, an ideal client is somebody who believes this is a vehicle for change, not
Yeah.
something to do. A bad client is somebody who believes this is something to do, not a vehicle for change.
Mm. Your social media is excellent, Piate, and you have some quotes on there that transform your passion into prosperity by monetizing your creative talents. It's not just an idea, it's a journey of turning what you love into a thriving business.
Always, always. But that requires you to do some inner work. Because what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about helping people? Oh, the other thing that I'm really not, non-ideal clients are also people that are just in it for the money. I don't
Mm,
work well with that. So the internet marketing kind that just want the girls and the money, typically I don't attract those.
mm. How is that revealed?
In the intake questions when we ask what it is that you want, and
Ha! Do they actually put that?
People will say, I want to make money. And then you
Ah,
say, well, when you say money, what does this mean? And they say, well, buy I want to buy the Ferrari. Why does the Ferrari matter to you? Well, because I really feel that, I want to show off that I'm successful. Red flag. If somebody says, well, I, want to buy a new car. Well, why does it matter to you? Well, I'm thinking about, I met this girl, I met this man, and the car that I've been driving is like 10 years old. I think it's time, and I want to, that has a different connotation. But the chasing
mm,
of more isn't typically, because I've worked with visionaries. Visionaries want more impact, and
mm.
with more impact comes more money. But if somebody has more money over everything else, that typically doesn't work so well with me.
Yeah, I know these types, and they're just constantly chasing.
Chasing you.
They're just constantly chasing. Yeah, and how do you think we can create a culture, whether at work or in schools, that acknowledges and addresses imposter syndrome constructively? There's another one of your quotes on Instagram. Imposter syndrome's a real thing.
But is it?
That's what I'm asking. Is it?
Yeah, but is it? So imposter syndrome comes from the story that you believe is true. So if I'm an abused child, that means I'm not loved.
Mm,
If I'm not loved, then I can't love myself because I'm not lovable.
mm,
If I can't love myself, I'm going to need external validation. Now I need other people to tell me that I'm amazing. But if they don't, because they're themselves in their own story and they want me to tell them that they're lovable, we have a whole bunch of broken people running around with imposter syndrome because nobody can take it out of themselves and expecting somebody else who also can take it out of themselves to tell you that you're amazing.
mm.
And then we call it imposter syndrome. So I pose the question, is that actually true? So imposter syndrome to me is that constant question, even if you're already sitting at the table, do I have a right to be at the table? Dude, you're already there.
Mm,
What are you even asking this question for? If you cannot feel that you have a right to belong, it's not the external story, it's an internal story. So now we have to go back to the story, which is where we started. So now, is the pain of staying there greater than your fear of changing? Does it hurt enough now? And so this is how the question just keeps repeating itself in our lives. Is the pain big enough now? Are you ready to
mm.
change now? What else needs to happen for you to recognize that? And then we keep holding on and holding on and holding on to the story. And now that story is a justification. And I mean, look at politics. That is the narrative that's exploited to the T. It's not your fault. It's all your fault, dude.
Mm.
Well, it's because this is what they're not telling you. Who the heck is they? The thing that the IRS withholds from you. The IRS is the government that you voted for.
Mm.
It's the stuff that you approve on the ballots. That's what you're looking at. So who is out there? You did all of this. And
Mm.
if you don't like it, undo it by voting for the right stuff. No, no, it's better if I believe that there's a secret force out there doing all these things to me and then I alone can fight against them. Oh, get me a break.
Syndrome is self-doubt.
Imposter syndrome is self-worth and self-doubt
Self-worth.
and lack of self-love. Yes. It's the need for external validation to get something that I cannot feel for myself.
You also, along those same lines, you have very strong opinions on how women are treated. You were at Elle magazine, you got a really high level there, and you didn't like the way women were treated. You still see it now. Talk to me about that. You left Elle magazine because you couldn't go any further. I believe your father got fired at his position, and you did some self reflection. But again, you just talk to me about women's place.
Yeah, so this seems to be such a loaded subject, and it's always
Mm,
amazing to me on why it actually is a loaded subject. One of the common arguments about the man and the woman stuff is where the men say, well, women don't lay bricks and they don't build roads or bridges. Most men don't build roads or bridges or lay bricks. Okay.
mm,
Is a very small percentage of men that actually has the physical ability, stamina, and whose job it is to do that. It is not that because a man does this that all men can take credit for it. That would be preposterous. So, what happens with women is that when we look at women, number one, there is a physical discrepancy between how men and women are built. Women are, by nature's choice, the gender that gives birth, right? Men can throw fits about this, or men can be appreciative about this. Men cannot give birth. Women do. Men have a part, but really the hard work and literally the labor is on women. So we cannot say that someone who is 120 pounds and 5'2" should be physically capable of the same thing that a 6'4" bodybuilder type at 220 pounds who was a linebacker in high school. That's idiotic.
mm,
We should also not expect that a 90-year-old man can be on the same hike as a 25-year-old woman who is an athlete. So it's these artificial comparisons of what is what causes all this distress. What I want people to look at is like, if I look at a man and a woman, I need to look at the equality. Equality does not mean sameness. It doesn't say sameness. It doesn't say
mm,
diversity, sameness, and inclusion. It says diversity, equality, and inclusion.
mm,
So the question is, what is the equivalent? Like, would you expect your 2-year-old daughter to do the same thing as a 12-year-old boy?
mm,
No. You're like, well, if we go and the 12-year-old is in sports and the 2-year-old in sports, you would think about what's the equivalent in activity. Because the measurement it's not a hard measurement. It's a fluctuating measurement. And so my work around women has always been, because I was a single mom and I'm an immigrant, so I didn't have family here, Joey, and it was very difficult for me to figure out how to get it all done and make money and feed my child, and having the bad divorce and the ex-husband that didn't want to pay for the longest time, and it was gnarly. And
mm,
I look at women and I see that we're still up against the same stuff that I fought for 30 years ago.
mm,
I mean, nothing ever changes. I mean, it's the same idiotic thing that I heard 30 years ago, I have to listen to today.
mm,
And I feel that when we look at, and I founded the Women's Code for the reason, there's really two parts about this. So, number one, we need to teach women that there is a code amongst women and that we have to be responsible for our own actions. And number two,
hmm,
if we are not on the same wavelength as women, how could we possibly expect that the outside world is going to give us something that we don't even think other women deserve? So in order to fight the bigger battle, which is equality, we need to first get along with each other, and that seems to be also problematic for a lot of women.
So how do you help women with this?
Well, I have created the Women's Code. I wrote a book about it, Happy Woman, Happy World, where I
Mhm,
outline the concepts. And it's a best-selling book. It's gotten multiple awards. I hope women read it and have these come to Jesus moments for themselves to say, who do I want to be in this world? How do I want to show up? And also, what kind of role model do I want to be for my children and for my girls? because how I show up as a woman in this world is a direct reflection of what my daughter gets to expect from how men will treat her,
Mm,
and then how she is going to manage her relationship with her own daughter. So we want to be very cognizant about it. And I think that in my world, the way I help women, and I have a couple of programs on how to, rocket launch your career, how to show up, how to pitch yourself, how to make a business case so that you sound intelligent, how to manage, when people say to you, you're so emotional, what do you do when that
mm,
happens? So I have a
mm,
strategy for that. So I have very specific things that I can give women on how to show up and be taken seriously, because a lot of it out there is a game. And do I blame men who are professionals in an organization if they, with a couple of stupid sentences, can take out half of their competition? Of course they should.
mm,
If it's that easy that all I have to say to you, you're so emotional, and then you derail in front of me and now you're no longer competition, that is a very easy sentence I will tell you
mm.
as a strategic decision. And then women get all bent out of shape. It's like, I can't believe it. It's like, you fell for it. He laid the bait, you took it. You can't blame him for that. Of course he's going to do it. You need to learn how to do this.
As a father of 2 daughters in their early 20s, I mean, what can men do? What can men do better to help in this situation?
It is coming at this from a perspective of support,
Mm,
not fixing, but support.
mm,
And to say, I see you, I see what you're doing, and for you specifically as a father, explain to them how men think.
yeah.
It's not personal. It has nothing to do with that guy at work has it out for your daughter. He does it because that's what he's been taught, and that's what he sees other men doing, and it just perpetuates again and again and again. It's a generational trauma or the
Mm,
generational story. Well, I saw my boss do that, and I saw the girl completely deranged, and then he got the job, and then he makes more money than her. I mean, if she lets him, that's on her. There's nobody out there coming to rescue you. That's what you have to tell them. They
mm.
have to learn how to rescue themselves.
Support,
Mhm.
not fix.
Mm-mm.
Have you ever achieved something great but felt like you didn't truly deserve it or serve it? What do you think happened? One of your quotes on Instagram.
Yes, sometimes we get into these moments where something amazing happens, and then we still kind
Yeah.
of don't believe it ourselves. Like when I sold my business and I made millions, and then the money comes in, and I'm still trying to prove that I have a right to be there. And it was a journalist friend of mine who, in my interview with him, just said, I'm going to need to stop you right here. Says, you don't have to prove it anymore. You
Mhm,
are already here.
mm,
So sometimes, as I said, we fight for the seat at the table and we're already at it.
hmm,
So we need to drop that. And when we get to that next level, or when we get to that achievement, we got there because we deserved it. We
mhm.
did something to create this. So just own it.
So Beate, I started my business in the '90s, and I was working way too hard. Similar, I know you know this story. You're just 14, 15-hour days, excuse me, and not paying attention to my diet, not working out. Before you know it, I got up to 340 pounds, and the doctor said to me, my daughter, my oldest, was just born. If you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see her graduate. So it was a moment of surrender, perhaps, where I took reflection, and in the next 7 months, I lost about 130 pounds. And I kept it off. You just don't look at it as a finishing line. And people ask me, even to this day, like they want some secret, like they want some quick fix. How did you do it? And I always say one word, Beate, and that's discipline. I got focused, I got discipline, and that's how I did it and continue to do it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life.
I think it's a decision. I think it was an actual decision you made
Hmm.
So the difference between achieving something and not achieving something is that you make the decision. When you make the decision, then all you need to do is like, what skill set do I need to have and what actions do I need to take? That's the discipline.
Hmm.
But I think that the actual decision comes first. So, first the decision, then you need to know, do I have the skills that I need to have? So you then whatever learned about nutrition, you followed a program, you exercised more, you figured out what skill set you needed to have to get the weight off and the discipline and took the action and stuck with it.
Hmm.
But the decision comes first. No question.
So in your life, I mean, do you consider yourself a disciplined person now?
Loaded question. In some
Yeah.
areas of my life I am and in others I'm not so much. Like if I were to say we keep repeating patterns until we learn them.
Hmm.
And, I understand the surrender principle and the creation principle. And then I made my money. I got into this business. I was not as disciplined as I was in setting my vision for this business. And so much has happened with COVID and then I did the women's code. And then I got in the line of fire of a bunch of incels and I got death threats and I had to walk away from that business
Wow.
because it just got too dangerous for me. That was in the aftermath of the Me Too movement, and Google had served me as the token feminist in front of a group of men that are just absolutely vile. And to the point where my husband said, I really don't want a guy in front of our house with a gun. So, because there was doxing and all kinds of things going on. So
Jeez.
I had to change again. So my discipline or my decision making was flawed because of external circumstances.
Hmm.
And it wasn't really until last year, Joey, that I found my footing again and really dove into the brand of the growth architect and my work with women and say, well, how does this all connect? What are the three entry points that I want to be at? What do I want to help people with doing? And where can I be of the most value? And then cutting the fat on everything that is not aligned with that core message. That's what we did consistently last year. And now now I'm at a point where I'm really back at the spiritual work, at the mindset part, the decision making is like, what do I want? And now putting these things back into action because it also changes all the time. I mean, we thought we had to figure out before COVID, then COVID came, then we had to figure it out again, and then it was just kidding. And now we're getting out of COVID, and then just kidding, economy. So just kidding. It's been so intense. I think people have an overall mental fatigue and anxiety and breakdowns because it's been so many changes and people don't like changes. So to answer the question, I could have been more disciplined, but at the same time, I do believe that everything happens for a reason and that I'm exactly where I need to be.
Hmm.
But then sometimes it's a little harder than others.
It certainly is. Do you believe right now you're where you need to be?
I do.
Hmm.
I do. Especially with the spiritual work I've just done over the new year. That was a massive game changer, which was a lot about my childhood trauma and admitting that these things actually did happen and allowing that to surface and feel what it felt like, but not as the scared child, but as the adult with the tools that has the tools for healing and allowing that and really believing that the work of when you heal yourself and you heal your trauma and your wounds, your vibration changes and your attraction is different because broken people attract other broken people. The wounded
Hmm.
healer attracts other wounded healers. But the healthy person attracts other healthy persons. The runner who can run 5 miles only wants to run with people that can run 5 miles, not 1 mile.
Hmm. Hmm.
The athlete wants to be around other athletes and finds a really good coach. So it's a vibrational thing and once you start making these decisions, you need to actually step into that and believe that. And so that's where I am. Yeah. So I definitely feel like at the right spot.
Beate Chelette, what motivates you?
Impact, impact. And more and more and more and more, this idea that as somebody who is almost 60, to be able to have built a brand that has relevance for a different generation, that allows them to tap into shortcuts, my mistakes, and then take that and become successful, that I don't think it gets better than that.
Mhm. How do you measure success?
Impact. The more impact we have our clients make, the more impact I make.
And you measure that by their success, by their review, by their passion, by
How many
their
people they serve, yes.
Hmm. Has that always been the case with you?
I would say more so than on others. I think that when you don't have money, money becomes always a big thing,
Mm.
and because you have to pay your bills. Once you have money, that certainly changes, admittedly, because it you don't have the same issues necessarily that you had before. But I would say I've always been impact driven. It's always made me happy when I see people succeed, when the photographers I represented tell me that they were able to buy vacation homes, or in the case of Fernando Bengochea, when he was lost in the tsunami, and his family, from the proceeds of the stories that we sold, was able to buy his mother a condo in Argentina.
Mm.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
Very powerful. So excited I got to speak to you, Beate. It was just such a pleasure. I know we've been kind of pushing this back and forth a little bit, but I'm glad we finally speak. So anybody listening, watching, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can, of course, listen to my podcast, The Business Growth Architect Show. And encourage you to go figure out what your talent is worth. Go to our quiz that we just designed to figure out what's your earning potential in this market at whatsyourtalentworth.com. We have a Facebook group that you can find at facebook.com groups, The Growth Architect, where we do private trainings where we talk about the 5-star success blueprint. So see if you want to join that, and drop in the DM and say hello, and make sure while we're at it that you um, go wherever you pick up Joey's podcast and you give him a 5-star review and subscribe to the podcast. And I want you to do
Mm.
one thing further than that. I want you to give him a comment. And the
Mm.
reason comments are so critical right now is because AI is taking over all the algorithms. And even if you put in a little heart, a green heart that signals that you listened or watched to the entire episode, it shows the algorithm that there's engagement. And that is absolutely critical to get these conversations in front of more people. And it is a labor of love. And then take this episode and share it with one other person.
Excellent advice, Beate. I thank you so much for your time. If I'm in the general Los Angeles area, perhaps all of us can get a cup of tea and talk a little bit more.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Joey, for having me. And thanks for the amazing work that you do.
You be well. Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciplined Conversations.